Real quick, before we get started, I want to give a shout out to the sponsor of this podcast, Greenlight.ai. We all know how important compliance is, and Greenlight.ai is the leader for compliance and EOR services, especially for talent platforms. You're going to hear about them later, but thank you to Greenlight. All right. Well, Ian, listen, it's taken us years to get you on here, so thanks for finally hopping on.
Great. That sounds terrible, but it's good to be here.
In typical British hard to get fashion. But listen, we got so much to talk about. So for you listeners out there, you heard Ruben's episode before this. About 6 months ago was when we met Ruben. And at the time, when we heard about crypto and stablecoins, I just thought about, in 2021, my construction friends getting into crypto and thinking, oh no, this is totally a farce if you're getting into it. But in talking with Ruben and seeing what's been shaping out for the last 3 months in the full flexible talent space, kind of intersects with remote work, distributed work, and we'll talk more about this, Ian, but talking about AI development, data analytic development, basically how the hell to make AI actually work, there's this aspect of stablecoins and bleeding into things like fraud protection and having millions of people in networks and all this kind of crazy stuff. But before we get technical, Ian, how would you describe yourself to our listeners?
Well, I work at ATM and I run ATM's enterprise business. So in other words, I interact with the organizations, marketplaces, large businesses who have distributed global, often freelance workforces that they work with. And we partner with them. But I'm a 1,000-year-old technology sales and marketing guy before I did any of that. And if you're going to get too technical, I'm definitively not a crypto guy. And I think that's one of the interesting parts of what we'll talk about, I'm sure. We live in the stablecoin world, but we live there for very practical reasons related to global workers themselves. And that's the appeal for me. So I think as we get into the practical benefits that we try to bring to the world, it's really not very crypto-y at all. And that was highly appealing to me. But that's my role in the business.
So listeners out there, you're going to hear a lot of the questions are going to end with, so what? Because I think when hitting on all the topics that we're going to hit on, the number one thing that I want you listeners to do is to be skeptical and to say, okay, this sounds cool, but how does this really impact my business? And so, Ian, how would you, if we kind of set the scene right now, how would you describe a quick recap on what is Airtm, how long has Airtm been in business, and who are the clients? Let's do a little kind of setting the stage here.
Yeah, it's a good thing to do. So Airtm's a payments company, and there's a lot of those around in the world. It's one a lot of your viewers won't have heard of. They'll have heard of PayPal, Payoneer, organizations like that. Many haven't heard of us, but we're a payments company. We've been around a decade. And the mission that our company's been on since the beginning has been oriented around the payee. The person who receives money is trying to retain value of that money and then is trying to do something useful with it. And there's a couple of components of that. We focus predominantly on what I think is called these days the Global South, developing countries. We had our heritage and beginning in Latin America, but we're widely used across Africa and Asia Pacific by individuals who receive money, often from companies paying them from work or from creator platforms, those kind of things, and who've struggled to retain the value of that money because the world is not a fair place often. And then to actually find a way to access and use that money that's simple, that's efficient, and that suits their lifestyle. So we were set up with that purpose in mind. And now somewhere north of 3 million people use us around the world to do exactly that. A big part of what that's become is about enabling relationships between organizations with workers around the world, often the freelance community, and those workers themselves. And it's funny, pay is one of those things that's often written down as an administrative procedure that needs to happen or the lowest common denominator of a work relationship. It turns out it's one of the most important and most intimate relationships that an organization and an individual can have together. And so we've leveraged our payments foundation to try to do more and more and more for those distributed global workers. And in so doing, to offer more and more and more solutions for the enterprises that they engage with. So that's what we do, doing it a long time, been in the crypto world, therefore, because of the way we deliver, for about as long as anyone. One of the first organizations in the world to execute payouts and large-scale payments business, leveraging stablecoin. We work with Stellar Foundation and the USDC stablecoin. There's my technical bit. The point is, We use that because it's deeply flexible for the users and offers an opportunity to bring fairness to their world. But we're amongst the first to have ever done that. So we've got a long heritage in this world of stablecoin, and find it to be rather convenient to use it as we scale our business and try and serve hundreds of millions more workers and digital entrepreneurs around the world.
So I got two questions, Ian. And you listeners, I'm going to give both questions so that you listeners know what's coming down the pipe. So the first question I have is going to be just why stablecoins, why crypto, right? Like, why is that even a thing? And then the second question, which was actually a really large theme, is so your title is SVP Enterprise, right? You've mentioned enterprise.
Fancy.
But it doesn't seem immediately correlated to digital wallets and enterprise, right? These seem like they can be two separate worlds. And so the idea of, okay, there are 300 million remote worker freelancers, which I actually plugged into Gemini and some of these LLMs. I was like, hey, how many freelancers are there globally? And it said around like, it was either 1 billion or 1 trillion, basically like very, very big, right? But so the idea of trillions and billions of people have digital wallets. All right, makes sense, right? And we've seen lots of digital wallets out there, and we prior had Venmo and all this kind of stuff, whatever. But then the coupling of the digital wallet slash the enterprise, right? And the interconnectedness is a massive theme that I hope you can help our listeners kind of like unclutter the clutter in terms of why a company like Airtm has an SVP of Enterprise, right? And how these two things intersect. Mm-hmm. So you, my friend, take a pick on which one you want to start with, either why crypto or why this, Airtm / enterprise interconnected world.
Let me see. Shall I justify my job first or second? Let's do why.
I swear. That did not come to my mind.
Thanks for that, mate. And my performance review isn't due for another month. I don't know why we're having to do this now. Let's do why crypto first, and why stablecoin particularly, because of course, for a lot of people, myself included, a couple of years ago, who really don't understand the world, crypto is crypto, and it's all rather scary and may well be very speculative. But there is this that's changing. But there's this inner world, this stablecoin world. In other words, crypto-oriented assets and tools that are tied to the currencies that you and I understand. In the case of the stablecoin we use, tied directly to the US dollar or assets akin to the US dollar in order to maintain exactly what the name describes, stability. So what you're dealing with is something that is stable in the way that you expect the US dollar to be. Exactly that stable. But alongside that it's not infinite, but it's considerable flexibility and utility on a global basis that the traditional banking system can't offer people or businesses. Not yet. Well, now banks are getting into stablecoin, so they'll be able to do it soon. But the stablecoin world allows you to use a set of tools and technologies that offer massive flexibility and choices for its users on a global basis. And our mission all along as an organization has been to operate borderlessly and globally in our support of the Global South. And so our selection of a model built on stablecoin is grounded in that. Plus, when we thought about our users, so many of whom are what we term and others term digital entrepreneurs, we understood that they're not just getting paid or earning, they then have things they want to do with the money that is theirs. And they want to do that easily, flexibly, and fairly. And in our estimation, the construct that stablecoin offers gave us the best opportunity to offer a range of products. Save it, spend it, add interest to it, leverage it, share it, whatever you want to do with your money, while maintaining that's the key word, the stability of what you've earned across the world. So that was at the heart of our choice to use stablecoin as an underpinning technology.
Would this be analogous to saying that pre-stablecoin equals the on-prem server world, and the companies that are able to go on cloud then have, 10 years down the road, massive implications of they can build better applications, they're quicker, they're faster, they're more cost efficient? Would that be analogous to say that these are the two different worlds, kind of like on-prem to cloud and kind of like old banking to new? Or
I think it demands that you assume your audience know what on-prem to cloud is, and that's not a universal truth. But I think it's a reasonable metaphor. I think it's reasonable. On-prem to cloud is a good metaphor. However, I think there's something more to it. I think it's not just about place. On-prem to cloud is often about place. It's also about access to function, access to tools, and democratization of that access. So I think there's an extension to that metaphor that says, This puts the power of banking technologies, let's say, into many, many more hands and makes it much more accessible. But it also widens the range of tools that can be offered because fundamentally, you've got mass flexibility to create and develop new forms of things on this stablecoin technology that aren't necessarily inherent to a traditional banking construct.
Interesting, which actually makes my brain go to, holy crap, this is why companies shouldn't be doing it themselves, because if there's now hundreds of more tools, that's the last thing I want. I still just want to pay, right? Like, I don't want to deal with all these different things. Right. Is that dumb to say?
Yeah, it's fine. It's true to say. It's complicated. You and I can do everything in our power to simplify this and make it straightforward. And it is at an abstracted layer. This is simple, but in truth, it's complicated. Airtm operates at one of 4 layers of delivery in this stablecoin world. And like many other worlds, it starts with a foundational infrastructure layer. You heard me mention a company called Stellar Foundation earlier, the people who originated the foundational infrastructure. There are then I'd call them institutional service providers on top of that, people who create rails and logic upon which any number of financial systems can run. We work with an organization called Bridge, now owned by Stripe, who many people have heard of, that are very effective at creating those broad structures for, say, consumer banking type products on top of the coin infrastructure. And then there are organizations like us who offer distinct, perhaps domain specific or use case specific, I'll call them applications, on top of the entire structure that are aimed at creating real value for real people or real organizations on top of those underlying structures. So it is complicated. I think unless you're a financial institution yourself, I would say, probably don't do it yourself. Work with organizations who have expertise in this to enable you to get what you want, which is, you said your question is going to be, so what, or what's the value? This is fundamentally about trying to get to business value or user value. You do that by working with expertise in application.
So I seldom do this, Ian. So I'm actually going on a limb to do this, and it might be pretty dumb. But what I want to do is I do want to pull up Market Map in regards to help us understand the interplay. So for you listeners out there, watch the video ASAP. And can you see my screen right here?
Relying on an old man's eyesight, Matthew.
This is blurry, but intentionally for you listeners out there, if you look bottom right, you see Airtm under payments. And the reason I bring this up is because as we're starting to frame out the why is there Airtm and Enterprise and how does this interconnectedness play, is our listeners do know that if you look at the flexible workforce, the infrastructure has things like EOR, COR, classification providers, payroll and benefits providers, and payments, right? And it can be very confusing that they all look the same. And if you look all the way to the right, you see Airtm under this payments. So I'm going to stop sharing now, Ian, because now let's get into what is the interconnectedness between an Airtm and an Enterprise. Why isn't it just Airtm or just Enterprise?
Yeah, let me try and I did sort of see the bottom right-hand corner there you were showing, and I think you've got a reasonable representation of some of the players in that market, which is the right place to start. So first off, why Enterprise first? Here's my job justification piece. As I said, we'd narrowed in specifically and deliberately. Although we have a specific geographical reach, as I described, although what we built was a user-centric wallet and payments platform. I've been in and around the growth company environment for a very long part of my career. And if you're too broad, that can be a recipe for not creating value for anyone. Yeah. What we identified very early is that a large number of our payees were what we term, it's not our term, but it's the term we've borrowed and used. They're digital entrepreneurs of some kind. They're creators. They are play testers in the gaming industry. They are data labelers and annotators in the AI industry. They are market research panel participants across the world. They're in a variety of these areas, but a lot of them, more than half, were digital entrepreneurs. And we made it our mission to specifically focus on that segment. They're aiming to serve 100 million or more of these digital entrepreneurs by 2030. As you said, can't be trillions, Matthew. There's only billions of people in the world.
It's a Friday, Ian. It's a Friday as we record this.
But certainly your AI tool of choice will tell you there's about 1.5 billion freelancers, and maybe 500 million of them are some kind of digital freelance workers. And we think that's about right. We're aiming to serve about 100 million. In serving them, we have to acknowledge a simple truth, and that is they don't stand alone. They don't just exist in the abstract and money arrives. There's another participant in their value chain. And that is a series of organizations, marketplaces, and enablers who either reward them for work done or they are the method by which they monetize what they've created, those kind of things. And our strategy was we have to deal with both sides of that market, because if we believe we're building the best and most thoughtful solution for workers, which is job number one, then how can that be true if we haven't certainly understood, but also probably provided part of the chain that begins with the enterprises that they interact with? So for us, the enterprise engagement mission is fundamentally a part of our mission to support the earning aspirations of 100 million digital entrepreneurs globally. And that means it's very important that we build relationships with the kind of organizations they deal with. Now, that doesn't mean those organizations have to buy something from us. Many do. And I'll happily advertise which ones do in a while. But we've created a product link that means that users can take control of that. It's quite possible for organizations, might take a marketplace of some kind, to keep wiring money and sending money to bank accounts in the way they're always used to doing to support their payment approach. But we've put power in our users' hands to connect their AirTM product into that experience so they can get the value for them, the fairness of a properly supported dollar payout, the options that USDC offers in terms of withdrawal methods and sharing methods. So we've put that power in the hands of the users. But we also work with a wide range of organizations who want to go further. We call it the act of paying fairly. And so they want to integrate our tools for them to be able to pay directly to people's AirTM wallets. And in that context, then we live in that melee of payments providers that you featured on your market map. Now, there's a variety of those because payments for an organization is part of a complex administrative structure. And I won't do competitive pitches. Having quickly grabbed the logos that you have on the market map there, you've got some players on there whose core expertise is the administration of pay. That's what it is. And that's complicated. It needs to fit into back office systems and those kind of things. And it's about administrative pay for all manner of workers, from salaried all the way through to freelance. And it's about administration of taxation structures. It's about administration of legal structures. There are organizations that specialize in that. As part of their solution, they may have a method by which you pay. In our experience, is that the best, most complete, most fair method? Often not. But those organizations exist. You then have some companies on there who are, they're traditional payments businesses. They usually have names that begin with pay. So you can pick the logos later. Very logical marketing strategy. Many of those, they're long-standing, huge audiences. Again, not a competitive pitch, but I would say there's two things that stand out. One, they're built for many money movement applications, from merchant transactions, all the way through to payment, but have largely been built alongside or with traditional banking rails. There's not yet a lot of prevalent stablecoin use in that community of companies. And as a result, they're built for so many applications. Very often our argument would be, if you're really trying to serve a digital entrepreneurship or freelance use case, there may be reasons to look more narrowly at something built for that. But those products are prevalent. We often operate alongside those products and services in company structures because they've already used, a PayPal or something to solve any number of money movement issues and not just the payment of freelance workers. And then you've got a couple of companies on there that are more infrastructure-like, those kind of things, who live perhaps at one of those other levels I referenced. They're not perhaps a user-facing application for payment, but they create more infrastructure, those kind of things. And very often we'll partner with those orgs. Companies like us are very specialized in a particular domain and are trying to develop our applications to be extraordinarily valuable in that domain for the people we care about. I've told you, we care about 100 million digital entrepreneurs. We care about them all, but we think 100 million or more will use us. And for that reason, we want to make sure their experience of receipt, use, and leverage of money is optimized for them, particularly in the Global South where we focus. But also we're offering value-added services around that. And that means earning and using, saving, creating interest. But it also means more, because a digital entrepreneur, a freelancer, does more than just get paid. They're actually building a business. I think so anyway. They're trying to build a business. They're looking for opportunities. And so as our users have asked us to help them find more earning opportunities, so we've developed the solution they have in their pocket, on their phone, so that they can receive money, but they can also find new opportunities to earn money from the companies we work with. Similarly, on the organization side and the enterprise side, they want to do more than pay. We operate alongside other tools who manage some of the administration and those kind of things that we described, and we integrate with those. But also we started helping those organizations. AI is a good example of this right now. More and more AI-centric businesses are looking for more and more specialized forms of expertise or experience as they go through their work of either training models or creating data sets for models or improving models. There's a real acceleration of search for highly specialized or unique skill sets or languages, those kind of things. And so in engaging with both parties in that equation, we've begun developing solutions on top of our core payment solution that allow our enterprise partners to do that within their relationship with their payees. We're not a work marketplace. Those exist and we love them and we try our best to partner with all of them. But we do have the ability to help in a relationship between people who are paid and people who are paying them. So we augment capability there, as I've just described, in helping them do things like match to skill sets, find a language requirement, find a detailed level of domain expertise in a particular subject, those kind of things. And it keeps evolving. I've given you a long answer and you probably had a few questions in there, so I'll shut up for a sec.
No. So one of the best parts of the show, Ian, by the way, is intentionally that we do video so that I can do things like this. You ready?
Yeah.
So one of the first things I asked you was, can we use on-prem to the cloud as an analogy to describe what's happening with you? And part of what I hear you saying is that, because this all comes back to the so what question above all of this of like, why should I really care, right? And so if you are, and I'm going to go as high level as if you are the enterprise CEO, this is why you need to make sure that your CFO, procurement department, even HR department is at least knowing about this. So when looking at the worker experience, typically there's three things. You have to find him, you have to manage him, and you have to pay him, right? And because of that, we've built all of this infrastructure that some tools are at the infrastructure level and some tools are ancillary. And so we look at something like a vendor management system, right? And then tools feed into that. Usually payment is looked at as its own infrastructure. And so if I'm someone that's responsible for sourcing, or I'm someone who cares about the talent engagement, retention, and the ability to access specialized skills, I typically don't give a shit about payment, right? I'm like, this is not my thing. I don't care about this. But when we look at this source, manage, and pay environment, if you don't have the payment covered under this new environment, then everything else is going to break. And so that's where what I was pulling up is this visual. So you listeners, look, it's as simple as this. These three things are what get people individually promoted or fired. And so if you can't find the right people and you're sitting as a strategic director in procurement or HR, you're going to get fired. On the management side, if people are leaving because they say that they can't do the work that they want to do because they can't access the experts that are actually going to help them, then you're going to get fired. And then on the payment side, if now HR and procurement are yelling at the CEO because the payments are breaking their work, then you're going to get fired even if you're the payments person. So to me, that's one of the big unlocks of hearing the way you describe it, is that payments seems boring right now, but it actually leads to not being able to access the expertise that you need. And this is the most important part that I can get to you listeners right now, in today's environment and in tomorrow's environment. So 5 years ago, it kind of was don't really care that much, but the more that individuals choose to work for themselves or need to work for themselves, the more that your payment rails are going to screw you, because they're going to be optimized for bulk buying and large buys, not individuals. And then it's going to come full circle in terms of these individuals are not going to want to work for you because, and Ian, this is where I get a little technical, there's going to be net 61 payment terms. And that's going to mean that they're going to either not take the contract or not re-engage with you. And then you extrapolate that at scale, and that gets really, really painful. Now, before I ask you about use cases and applications, have I grossly bastardized describing the world you live in?
I would never say that about you, Matthew. Let me reinforce it. I think you said something very important. Look, it's easy for dialogue to be dominated by the source and manage part of the conversation, because that sounds complicated and important, and indeed it is. But here's what our research says. So we we spend a lot of time talking to and researching our own community. And again, I'll repeat, it's 3 million plus payees, whole bunch across Asia Pac, Africa, Latin America and beyond, many of whom, more than half of whom, are engaged in digital entrepreneurship activities alongside businesses. They accept, as entrepreneurs, as freelance workers, that they're probably going to have to work with a few different platforms. They're largely ambivalent about which platform they have to use. Remember, we always look through the lens of the company. They're largely ambivalent, the workers, about the platform they're going to have to use to find a connection to companies. They know there's a few, they know they're going to have to do it. They get truly impassioned if they have to use multiple different methods to receive and manage money. The ability, and by the way, they make choices. This is, see, the employer-employee relationship says we, the company, have a method to pay and it's into your bank account and here it is. And if you work for us in a regional country, we have a subsidiary or whatever that can do that. The freelance dynamic has two centers of power, and the worker is one of them. And they make choices about how they want to manage their money. And across the developing world, we are not the only choice, but we are a major choice. And we're a major choice because it's easier, fairer, quicker, cheaper, all of those things for that user. They get impassioned negatively if they have to make a different choice to be able to work with a different company. And that's what we spend our time sharing with the CFOs and COOs we work with. But there's very little overhead involved in deploying a payment method, even within your existing infrastructure, that is just simply appealing to millions of people. But it does make a massive difference in terms of satisfaction, comfort, engagement, retention, and the will for users to recommend other workers who you might need if you can satisfy some of their requirements. That's what we focus on.
Hey everyone, real quick, I want to talk about the risk that is involved with an independent workforce. No matter where you are, whether it's the US, whether it's Brazil, whether it's the EU, whether it's London, there is risk in how you classify and how you work with individuals. Unfortunately, it's not as easy as just paying someone. The classification, the actual collaboration, the contracts, the payments, everything is intertwined and must be connected in a way that doesn't get you in trouble with the tax authorities, regulatory authorities, and even potentially class action lawsuits. There are numerous examples of this. Just search classification lawsuit on wherever you want to use and you'll get plenty. Which is why today's sponsor, Greenlight.ai, is the modern EOR, modern compliance solution for the modern workforce. There's 4 things that we want to call out when hiring an independent worker that you need. And that is, you need to onboard, you need to classify, you need to send payments, and you need to manage this global workforce. It's more than just one person, and Greenlight has all of that covered. All right, I want you to head over to greenlight.ai and tell them Human Cloud sent you. Can we double click on the community and even some of the data behind that? Because I think this is where what I would say is what's most frustrating with me when I went from Silicon Valley into Microsoft was Silicon Valley was this world of democratization and individual empowerment, right? And I fully believed, I was like, okay, like 80% of the world is going to be working for themselves and have power and control through these digital networks. And then when I got into Microsoft, to be honest, it was, oh, no. Nothing's ever going to change. We're going to have a BPO. We're going to have approved vendors. Now we're sitting in a world that, those norms that we thought were in place are actually starting to implode. And one of those norms being that, hey, if you want to work with these people, you can't do it through your current VMS. You can't do it through your current approved vendor channels. And the language that you listeners will understand is if you want someone good, it's going to take you 6+ months to find them and you'll probably never find them. And part of what I think we're hitting on, Ian, with you is if you want to develop the next generation of AI, if you want to develop the next generation of product, the individuals that you need to build this are outside of the BPO channel. And your payments might be one angle to look and say, hey, we can actually access them, but it doesn't look like traditionally. It doesn't look like we just go to we pick up the phone to procurement and say, I need to develop this AI model. I need, 1,000 workers. Instead, they're sitting in what sounds like the Airtm community. But so could we double click on this Airtm community aspect?
Yeah, of course we can. I think you make a good point. The BPO industry's come a long way, and of course, most of the organizations in that space now have their version of a contractor marketplace, something like that. But that comes to a level. I was actually on a call yesterday morning with a major global BPO organization who are now taking the next step, which is to create a global, genuinely freelance database of workers who can be deployed in minutes on projects that don't need to be structured into the tens of millions of dollars, because that's the direction the world's going in. The AI tools that we're all learning how to use have been built on the backs of freelance workers on a global basis, and actually not a lot of North American or UK freelance workers predominantly around the global south. The market research that powers most of the brands we buy every day is built on the backs of research panels built around the global south of workers that we are anonymous to most of us. The games we all play, if we're gamers, I'm not, but if you're a gamer, those have been play tested and perfected to make sure you can't break the game midway through by groups of distributed freelance workers that are anonymous to most of us. It's already begun. Yeah. The maturation of models to accommodate that is catching up rather quickly. Actually, in the AI industry, there's a company in that space called Turing who partner with a lot of the major AI models to help them build, improve, all those kind of things. And their CEO this morning posted, I have it up actually, I'll read it. He said, most common job on earth in a few years will be evaluating and training LLMs and agents, large language models and agents. Billions of humans, not trillions, Matthew, but billions of humans will do this part-time on platforms like his own. It'll include everyone, from the world's smartest humans to everyday knowledge workers across every field. And I think that's pretty poignant, because the area where everyone's developed thus far is to that area of consultant level contractor or expert level worker, and that will continue. The team, Garrett and all over at Handshake, are building an excellent business at engaging the US student population for expert work, those kind of things. But there's still this massive underlying movement for the tasks we don't think about, all that unfashionable stuff that really is the world of work, that will continue to scale and scale and scale, and will involve businesses needing to adapt to engaging large communities of distributed workers who may do small componentized pieces of work, either enabling or leveraging AI in order to build business models. And we think there's a massive purpose in supporting that part of the world. And that's where you get to your hundreds of millions or billions of digital entrepreneurs. So it's massively important. It's starting in the AI industry, but it'll expand everywhere else, because, everything's going to need to get localized, and translation is a business model that's undergoing that same evolution right now. Where else can you make sure that you can service the rare language requirements of adaptation to a localized requirement somewhere in the world than the community who speak that language themselves? And that offers freelance work opportunities for a wide range of people.
Can you give me, Ian, the pain required? So two things are popping out in my mind. And the first is the pain required to actually run a Airtm community, right? Like why not just stand it up tomorrow? And the reason I ask is, if you are a staffing firm or a BPO, why can't you just add this tomorrow? And then related to that, what are the skills that this really, really is getting involved with? And third, I'm sorry for bringing all this up because you're going to forget and I'm going to forget, but what questions do leaders really need to be asking? Because one of the toughest parts about your world is most leaders are sitting in unknown where they don't even know the questions to ask. And if you can give them the right questions to ask, then that is usually the toughest part getting there. But so let's talk about the pain in building an Airtm community and paying the global south. What's so hard here?
Well, it's all hard, man.
and let me make sure I clarify. Ruben, the founder, he started in San Francisco, right? So this also wasn't just like he is the nerd of nerds in that way. But okay, so deep into the pain.
Yeah, he started in San Francisco, but at a personal level and through the relationships and things he had a visceral understanding of the pain that was going through. And look, our community started as a method to solve a problem for users, and it did not start out to solve a freelance worker problem. It has evolved in that direction. Many work marketplaces have evolved to, at least try to solve the consolidation of the worker group if you like, or the accessibility to that worker group. But it's funny, you're building a marketplace. It's a very specialized industry, and your main job is to try to balance supply and demand. It's a throwaway comment that is one of the hardest things in the world to do, which is why you and I both know marketplaces out there that have up to millions of worker members and zero projects in play. So those worker members are off having to do other things to find their money. So the creation and continuance of a marketplace and that constant rebalancing of supply and demand is, I think, one of the most difficult things to achieve. The reason I exist, back to my job description, the reason I exist is in part to balance that supply and demand in our own worker marketplace. Our worker marketplace has evolved, our community has evolved because they were a group of people who chose us to manage their money. And it transpired that many of them were looking for more opportunities to earn and make money. And we've chosen to help them do that. It is very difficult to do that. In my case, it's hard to get companies to say, sure, we'll add you to the roster of tools we use. And that's very difficult. Doing it yourself, you might well choose to do it yourself. Some are doing that, but one has to understand that building the community, getting people to come, not necessarily that difficult. Managing it in general, administering it, not that hard. There are specialists in community leadership, those kind of things. Finding a way to properly balance supply and demand so this becomes meaningful for both participants. Extraordinarily difficult, and more difficult if you're doing it just for your company, frankly, because there's going to be that mismatch. The moment there's a mismatch, again, you've got power on both sides. Freelancers are not just working for you, and they're not just in your marketplace or your community. So they're going to go elsewhere. So maintaining continuity is so critical. That's very, very difficult. As I said earlier, we're not a work marketplace. We are, we're a service provider to our own community of something that has to be good for them from a payment perspective. And we choose to take seriously the role that we have to balance supply and demand. And that means we provide solutions to enterprises ourselves. We think that puts us in a rather unique position because we're not trying to build our marketplace. We believe it grows organically as we serve our users well, but it is of utility to the organizations we deal with because it gives them a rapid start to access to people. If we already pay hundreds of thousands of workers every month who are doing data annotation or AI model improvement work, it is reasonable to assume that that same community of freelance workers who have absolute agency over the choices they make may be an accessible community of value to other organizations who want to do that work. And we're more than happy to make the connection because it's good for those workers. And at the end of the day, we're a business. Somebody will get paid and we will make the money that we are here to make, of course, but we'll service that proposition. So certainly I think we're a helpful assist in forming a marketplace and also doing that hard bit of maintaining supply and demand. But I think culturally, the issue for perhaps many of your viewers and listeners is going to be trying to work with that idea that you are not the only choice a freelance worker can make. And they are simultaneously making other choices and they have power. And you've got to serve that somehow, right?
And I think that here's where I'll tell you what, since I started in the freelance world, it's so tough for me to not just kind of poo-poo that and be like, well, who cares? Because for me, I look at that in terms of, okay, these individuals are working for other people. I look at that and I think that's a massive strength because then I'm not as worried about making sure that I have to pay them 100% of their time. Right. I can only pay 25% of the time. And that's a win-win for them and me. And the amount of times that we lean into our own freelance network from like hey, this one question would take us 3 weeks to answer and even get to the right question. And it'll take you literally 2 minutes. I kid you not. And this is such a funny example, but so, we, as you know, we're building out a platform. And as part of the platform, you have a subdomain. And so right now we have humancloud.com and we need an app.humancloud.com. I'm not ashamed to say it took us about 3 weeks to figure out what to do. And we were using we were using Gemini and Claude to ask, how do we do this? Yada, yada, yada. No joke. When we leaned into our freelance pool, it took one of the people, it took them less than 30 seconds to say, hey, try this. And it worked like that. And thank God we didn't have to pay this person 100% of the time because we couldn't afford them. And thank God we had a mindset that said, well, it's about the outcomes and the impact and we treat that person right. And so we get to, do others. So I I can't stress that enough. Now, as we get to sort of the end, what do you think that every single executive, both in the enterprise, on the let's say a Microsoft, but then also the talent platform CEO. And so the talent platform CEO that has 1 to 10 million users, less than 1% of engagement, they haven't even opened up the hood of their payments. They don't really care. What would you say to both of those executives in terms of what they need to do and be thinking about right now?
Well, and this is going to be a payment centric answer because I think it's so hideously underestimated. I think the first question all executives need to be asking themselves is who am I optimizing payments for? Am I optimizing it for me and my marketplace and my business, or am I genuinely optimizing for the individual who's going to contribute to my business, albeit 10% of the time on a freelance basis, maybe once, I don't know. And our contention would be, based on the research in our community, is the more you optimize for the recipient, the more you get the value of having those recipients involved at all. So there's a fundamental sort of philosophical question. If I'm going to leverage a community or work with a community of freelance workers, do I philosophically care about the value of what they do and their commitment to it with me on my platform? If I do, then it's very important that I examine the optimization of my payments experience for them, not for me. Doesn't mean your experience and your administration and your structures need to be bad. That's why people like me exist, to make sure there's an enterprise end to our product. But if you optimize for that user community, then you're respecting them, you're being fair, but you're also receiving all the benefits that drives if you believe that there is integrity to your model of working with freelancers. So you get commitment, you get work quality, you get the word of mouth within a community that's so vital for finding your next workers. You get the value you anticipated from that freelance effort. And in our world, because we serve digital entrepreneurs in the global south, who are widely used to fulfill freelance work across a multiple number of industries, we therefore contend that you've got to optimize for the challenges that exist across the global south. And that is, pay can be hard to access. A US dollar is not necessarily worth a US dollar in some countries. You can't always get money into a bank account. You can't always even get money beyond the black market. And whatever a user is experiencing in those places, it is worthwhile you, as the payer, optimizing for. And the good news is, there are companies like mine and others, but mainly mine, who can do that for you and make that part of your value proposition for freelance work, not that problem you've got to overcome in your FAQs that everyone's going to email you about and be dissatisfied with.
It's really, I'll give you an analogy, and I'm going to hate myself for giving it because it reminds me of like the typical like business school, like, oh, I have an MBA, so I have all these answers. But the way you talk about it actually kind of to me sounds like if large freelance population, then these payment rails. And I think the best equivalent that I think we've seen in the past 50 years is if you think about like Intel Inside, meaning like, hey, you want to have a good laptop? Well, it better have a good processor. Okay, if it's Intel Inside, then you can trust that it's going to be a good laptop. That's not saying that the laptop only has Intel Inside. It just means that you can trust that it's not going to shut down every 2 seconds. I don't want to get over my skis, but it kind of potentially Airtm kind of sounds like an indicator, to be honest, of a good freelance network in terms of if there's Airtm, then freelancers are engaged and give a shit. If not, that might be an issue.
We call it Airtm Friendly, not for any other reason than because at this point, nearly 4 million people out there want you to be Airtm friendly. They recognize that, those workers, those users, recognize that as a preferential choice for the countries and situations they find themselves in. And it makes money work harder for them, and it makes the payment they receive fairer for them. So our corporate partners use a designation, we apply a designation called Airtm Friendly, which resonates for our users in the way you've just described. And you're right, it is a little cheesy. It is a little, I'll probably hate myself for it too, but it's an appropriate link. Because what matters is, does the user recognize that you are making an attempt to be consistent, fair, and optimizing for their experience, not just yours, which really, really matters.
Listen, Ian, probably the most important question of the whole podcast is where can our listeners find you, Airtm, and what do you want them to do? Do you want them to go straight to the website? Do you want them to go read a specific book or something? Give us the links of our list for.
Okay. This is the question you didn't prepare me for. So links I'm not so good at, but you can find the website at airtm.io, and there's lots of ways to connect there. You'll find me. Anyone can hook up with me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty easy to find. I'm the Ian Gilbert online who is not a serial killer from the UK. And there is one. I don't think he has a LinkedIn profile. So you can find me there. On our website, you'll find it's user-centric first, and then there's an enterprise section for the business leaders here, because that's the area for you. But I would recommend direct outreach. On our company's LinkedIn page, you'll find a couple of guides to the leverage and value of stablecoin, which might be useful for a number of your viewers. So I would suggest start there. But if in doubt, ping me on LinkedIn, and more than happy to get into conversation with anyone.
Ian, thank you for hopping on, my friend.
You're most welcome. Thanks for having me.